Every marriage hits rough spots, but what derails many these days is infidelity by a spouse. David and Lisa King, not their real names, told their story last time on Excellent Living. David had a one-night stand, Lisa found out, and in a state of shock and anger, set out to hurt David by ruining his reputation. But it was her reputation on the line when she shoplifted twice, hoping to get media coverage and bring shame and embarrassment to David. God in His grace spared her from serving jail time, but this incident led both of them to focus on the depth of her hurt and the healing required if their marriage was going to survive. They tell their story in the book Affair Repair. If you missed our last broadcast, we encourage you to listen online or order the CD of this entire interview, Affair Repair, when you visit excellentliving.org. David and Lisa are telling their story to help other couples know that after adultery, you can have a solid marriage. They talked with Cheryl Martin about what a couple can do to repair their marriage or prevent an affair from happening in the first place.
Your story is a success story because I have interviewed people where their spouses were involved in emotional affairs and possibly actual sex act, and those marriages did not survive. So in many instances, when infidelity has occurred, even Christians have chosen to walk away.
So many, if we had time, we could list people who we knew. We obviously wouldn't do that, but it broke our hearts. And the thing about it is, we realized when we went through this chapter that God was still bigger. And we began to go back to our faith of childhood. And the question became, is God really bigger than our situation? You know, we sing all these songs about how great is our God and there's nothing impossible. But that's the thing. When the rubber meets the road, is it really something that you believe, or is it just a song that you sing? And we felt like we had to really begin to trust in the God that we had sang about for so many years, that He really could heal and restore what we ourselves had broken down.
Is every man, whether he is a Christ follower or not, vulnerable to having an affair?
I believe so, Cheryl. I would say that without reservation or hesitation. And I think one of the factors that allows these things to happen is because we don't admit the possibility that we can fall. As a matter of fact, when we look at the biblical characters, my namesake, King David, King David was a man after God's own heart, who the scripture says he fulfilled the plan of God for his life and his time. Yet and still we all know that the king fell. And why did he fall? Because he had the same vulnerabilities. And if we don't address those vulnerabilities and be honest with ourselves and with others, then we set ourselves up for failure because we don't acknowledge that this is a potential blind spot. And I think both men and women, husband and wife, need to talk about these things, and it needs to be discussed in the church as well.
And what are some of the vulnerabilities you see for men?
I see, first off, especially nowadays, there's such a disconnect. People don't like to be accountable. We live in a vacuum now, and there's a lot of technology that's great, but technology can also isolate us from one another. And it also makes easy access nowadays. People we see right now on the internet will share things, intimate details that they never would have said in person before. So that's one inroad. Another inroad that we face, unfortunately, is the sexualization of our culture, beginning at young ages. Men are taught that women are sex objects. And sisters, let me help you out. It doesn't help in the church sometimes, some of the outfits that we wear. If men are going to see you, and we're being told everything is sexy. I saw something the other day on TV. It was talking about a sexy piece of chicken, advertising food. Now, when males are bombarded with these images day after day from childhood into adulthood, and women parade themselves, and that doesn't give men an excuse, but when you make it easy for men to see you as a sex object, then it's easier for a man down the road to move from fantasy to actual action.
Even though he's walking with the Lord.
Even though he's walking with the Lord. And I think that that's where accountability comes into play. We got to have brothers around us who not just ask us about the sports, ask us about how work is going on, but ask us the real questions. What are you struggling with? How has the Lord spoken to you? When you see a brother who's fallen away, make it your priority to come alongside him, begin to ask him, because we've got to hold each other accountable. Also, we've got to spend time with God. We spend time going to church, but that doesn't equate to time with God. When we come to church, we should be collectively worshiping after we've done it individually. But if we're not spending time with the Lord, spending time in His Word, time in prayer, time in confessing our struggles to the Lord, then it's just a matter of time, whatever area we're struggling in, till we have a breakdown.
So, in other words, what you're saying is, in the church should be an open forum where a man can even admit, I have these struggles, and I'm afraid a lot of times it isn't even discussed. So a man may feel, I'm the only one still struggling with this, even though I'm supposed to have a changed life. Because were you a Christian before you had your one-night stand?
Sure, I was a Christian, but I was a young Christian who was just going into my adulthood, and I really didn't comprehend and understand what a real intimate walk with the Lord was. And secondly, I'll be honest, I really didn't understand a covenant relationship. And I think that is so key, that we've made marriage in our society a contract versus a covenant, and a covenant between you and your spouse and God. And this is no affront to anyone else, but I know back in those days, marriage counseling, or pre-marriage counseling, I should say, was almost non-existent. You went to your pastor and said, I want to get married. And they said, okay, it's better to marry than to burn. And so you got married. But you never talked about the issues that build a strong, godly marriage, so you have a strong foundation to grow from. And so because of that, you go in, and if you haven't addressed those issues, that same baggage you had before marriage, just like I thought, well, the struggles I have will be gone once I get married. That's not the case. You just take them into marriage with you.
You mentioned something in the book, and you said, in A Fair Repair, you said before you got married as a man, you wanted to feel as if you had a magnetic pull on the opposite sex.
Men have big egos. And part of the challenge, and even how I met my wife when we were in school, I was just striking up a conversation. I like to speak to everyone. And when I was talking to her, she kind of let me know that she wasn't available because she had a boyfriend. And when she said that, automatically something rose up in me like, who does she think she is? I could have her if I wanted to. And now the hunt was on. I tell all the time, had you just been nice to me and been a friend, you could have stayed single. I would have left you alone. But when you threw down the gauntlet, but you didn't know it, because we have that ego, so that hunt was on. And guys like to chase. But women, let me tell you something. One of the things about it is men respect women who have boundaries. Because I wrote in the book that we like the party girls to have a great time with. But they're not the girls you want to settle down with. And I know it's wrong, but we have those two different sets of girls. And I had my party girls I partied with, but when I met Lisa, she had the virtues and the character that I was looking for in a wife. And I was young. We met. I was 18. She was 17 years old. But right then, and I wasn't thinking about marriage, but I was thinking, if I got married, this is the kind of girl I would marry. And it moved from this is the kind of girl to this is the girl that I want to marry. And I appreciated how she carried herself.
Another powerful thing that you said in the book that I want you to break down for women is this. You said women have no idea the power they have over a man's ego. If they did, they could take over the world. Talk about that power that women have.
It's almost like the saying, the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. If a woman knows a man has an ego, and she knows how to manipulate his ego, not in the wrong way, but to stroke his ego, you can get men to do things if you make them think it's their idea. And women have that power. What women don't understand is the power of words, what they say and how they say it. Some women talk to a man in such a way that it makes him almost feel like less than a man, so he feels justified in going out. But a woman who understands that if I say the right things, I'm not saying you can't be a strong woman, but if I say the right things and encourage him in the right ways, the responses that I'll get from him, even single women, if they understood how they carry themselves, if they think of themselves as quality, a guy would view as quality. I'm not saying stuck up, snobbish, and arrogant, because that turns guys off. But if you are polite, but you have confidence, if you say, I am valuable, a guy will perceive that you're valuable. If he has to work to be with you, he will work to keep you. If he doesn't have to put in effort and you're doing all the chasing and all the begging and all those things there, what you're telling him is, I am so invaluable, or I have so little self-worth until I'm just glad you're interested in me.
You know what concerns me, David, is I tend to see women who are not in the relationship, the other woman seems to be more aware of her power than the wife.
That's totally
And so
the case.
is it possible that a wife within the marriage can tap into her power to keep the marriage strong?
No doubt, because if you look at, I bet if you could read a book from the other woman's perspective, some wives would say, I'm not going to do that. And that's the problem right there, because as long as it's not something that violates what the Word of God says, we a lot of times put all these restrictions of what we're not willing to do, especially when we used to be fun when we were single. But I'm not doing that. But someone else will come along and say, I'll do these things. And he finds them important. You used to listen to his stories, and now you keep saying, nobody wants to hear that stupid story again. You used to laugh at his corny jokes when you were dating him. Now nothing's funny. You would go places and do things you didn't like. And the same thing for guys. But now nothing interests you. You used to dress to get his attention. But now I don't have to go there. If he really loved me, he would love the inner me. Well, that's true, but he liked the outer you when he dated you. And so work on that outer part also, so that he has interest still. Because if you don't do those things, I don't care what you say, how wrong it is. You open the door, and you're not responsible that if he steps out. But you may have played a role in him stepping out.
And we should point out, and we've said this before, and you say this in your book, that there is, in the end, no justification for a man to step outside of his marriage and to violate his marriage vows.
None whatsoever. You know, we can make all the justifications, and if you had done these things, and if you hadn't done this, no, those might be factors that help us develop certain feelings. But when it's all said and done, each man is responsible for his own actions.
Because you
Lord.
took full responsibility for what you did.
I was absolutely wrong. There was no one else I could blame. Yes, my father did this, and I saw this, and it played a role in how I viewed sex, but that didn't make me do it. I wasn't coerced into doing it. No one held a gun to my head and said, you must do this because someone else has done it, your friends have done it, maybe your wife didn't say something to you that day. There's no justification. When it's all said and done, I've got to be accountable for my actions before the Lord.
You're listening to Excellent Living. Our guest again today, David and Lisa King, not their real names, the authors of the book Affair Repair. Their marriage survived David's one-night stand, but it took forgiveness, a lot of work, counseling, and prayer. They encourage other couples to fight for their marriages after an affair. To learn more about our guests, their book, and this weekly broadcast, go to excellentliving.org. That's excellentliving.org. We return now to Cheryl asking David for his words of wisdom to men contemplating adultery.
What would you say to a man who's been thinking about having an affair?
I would say, and it's maybe hard to do, but count the cost. Or if you could, one of the things I think it would be so nice if we could see the end result and begin to look backwards from things. If we say, okay, this is what the problem is going to be, and if I don't do this, I won't have. Because to me, the biggest problem I've always had is regret. When I'm in a situation, and it's not something that was out of my control, but something I brought on myself, and I'm just replaying that thing, and in my mind, say, if I could just go back, if I could turn back the hands of time, think like that now, because let's be honest, men, the sex act only lasts a few minutes. And if you think about, even for those who unfortunately have had sex before marriage, and women, I'm just going to be honest with you, a lot of times when you're sexually active and you're single and you think a guy just wants to cuddle and talk to you afterwards, he doesn't. I'll just be honest with you. For the most part, his mind has shifted to another gear. He's trying to figure out how to get away, how to go play ball, how to go be with the guys. But we think that we think that he's thinking like you because you want the intimacy. Well, guys, what I want to challenge you is, if you know that feeling, well, think about it times 100 on a worse side. That now you are dealing with not just a woman who you're dating, but your wife, and you've got to live with her. You may have kids involved. What impact will it have on your kids? Do you want to have a happy marriage at home, or do you want to go home where it's stress-filled, where you don't want to be in the house, where you're trying to stay away for long hours?
Because you never expected Lisa to find out, did you?
Never. And matter of fact, when she found out, it was at the point in my life where I was fully committed and walking with the Lord. It would have been different had it happened when I wasn't fully committed. But I was serving in the church. I was committed to being a good father, a good husband, doing Bible study with my children. And when it happened, I was like, God, why now? Why didn't it come out then? But God knew what he wanted to do in our lives and the character. And I think part of it was because if we don't address those things, then there's always the potential for it to creep back in.
And that's why when she asked you, did you cheat on me, that's why you couldn't lie.
I couldn't lie at that point because
you had lied the first time she
Yeah.
asked you.
I just wanted to be free. It was like having something over your head. It's like people who you see have been running on the run for years from the law, and they get caught, and it's almost like, whoo, that's the feeling. I mean, I wasn't excited. I was hurt about the pain that I knew we were going to go through. I had no idea it was going to be, how significant it would be. But on the other hand, it was almost like my mom always said, if you tell on yourself, people can't hold it over your head and blackmail you.
When people read your book, Affair Repair, and you've put everything in there, what are you hoping more than anything they will walk away with? And I'll ask both of you that. First of all, Lisa, I'll start with you. What are you, because I'm sure this was cathartic in some way, but it dredged up some things that you would rather forget. And I love in the book, you share your perspective. David shares his perspective, and then you come together and talk about things you can do to repair your marriage. But what are you hoping people will really gain from this, from you sharing your story?
I would pray that they would actually consider, and like my husband mentioned, count the cost. Marriage is so sacred. It's a vow that we made before the Lord. More importantly, think about the vow you made before the Lord. I don't want to hurt the Lord's feelings anymore in my life. And although I know in different areas in our lives we are going to fail, but if we can just reflect on the man that's what helped me, the man I fell in love with. This was an act that he did, and it was huge, it was major, but we conquered it. And you can conquer it through prayer and fasting and talking it out and communicating. So I would strongly urge you to seek help. Please do. Fight for your marriage. It's worth it. I can say now, 25 years of marriage, really, that pain was significant. I will not dispute that. But it was so worth staying with David and fighting for our marriage and seeing where God has taken us to another level in our love. So I would strongly encourage women to fight.
So you would
for
say you love him more today than you did before the affair?
Honestly, yes. Yes, I do.
David?
Cheryl, when we wrote the Affair Repair book, it was very difficult, but it was also a release as we wrote it. Some things were coming out. As my wife mentioned, you kind of reflected back on some things, and it was painful writing those things, especially when I finally wrote the chapter when I admit to the affair. That was I cried when I wrote that because I remembered the pain that I caused her, and it was so difficult. But when I look back, as Lisa said, 25 years of marriage, 3 beautiful children, our good times far outweigh the bad times. And I realized that we could have missed out on all that had we divorced and went our separate ways, or had we even not divorced but just lived under the same roof and said we're not going to address this issue. Because a lot of folk are divorced spiritually. They're living under the same roof, but there's no unity there. But when I realized that we have an opportunity, and so in writing this book, the key takeaway I want people to get is there is hope. I mean, not only did we have to deal with my affair, we had to deal with my wife going through the legal system and potentially facing jail time. Most people who knew us have always told us, you guys have the perfect marriage, you have the marriage that we want, but they never knew our story. Mm-hmm. And so we wanted people to say, well, if they could see our lives and see how we live and love one another and know our story, that they could say there's hope for us. And that's the thing that people, if you could hear our hearts, there's hope. Don't give up. Fight for your marriage. The easiest thing to do is quit. And they don't tell you when you quit, you're still going to have the hurt and the pain. And the numbers show that if you do divorce, not that you can't work it out, but a lot of second marriages in a divorce and then third marriages. So fight for the first one.
It's hard work.
It's hard. And marriage is hard. It's not a cakewalk. 25 years in, we put work into this. But I wouldn't change what I have now. But I thank the Lord often. I say, God, thank you for giving her to me. God, thank you for the years. Lord, give us many more years. I look forward to growing old gracefully together and enjoying her company. And I know had we not fought, we wouldn't have these moments. So it's hope that God can restore. And that's why we wrote the Affair Repair book, because God restored us. We want to let others know he can restore your marriage.
I just want to thank you just for your openness, just sharing. I see the tears in Lisa now. It's still a very moving. And I'm sure as you sit here, for you to reopen this chapter for one reason, to give hope and encouragement to anyone who's listening right now, and you're not listening by accident. So many people will say, as a Christian, you have a right to walk away once your husband or wife has been unfaithful. And unfortunately, David and Lisa, you would say there are instances where one person wants a marriage and the other doesn't, and you have no other choice. But in your case, thankfully, both of you wanted it. And I love what you said, Lisa, and I think this is so important. You said, God hates divorce. I don't want a divorce, and I'm going to fight no matter the anger, the revenge. That came back to you, that no matter how I feel and how angry I am at my husband, I don't want to anger God, so we're going to fight this thing out. Absolutely. So thank you so much. And I noticed in your book, you have discussion questions for couples.
The point is, you got to talk about things. The Affair Repair book was written not just to tell our story, but to get couples talking, and not just couples. I understand that the actions we make in adulthood start well before we become adults. This book is really written not just for marriage, but for singles and for teens. And I know ministries now who are using it for their teens. Matter of fact, I got a message the other day from a teacher who got the book, and she read it, and she said she took the discussion questions in the book and used them in her class with her teenage boys. And she said they had the best talk they've ever had in class. She said because, one, it allowed her as a woman to see how guys think, but two, allows her to begin to impart and help develop good answers in kids while they're young, so that they can make good choices, so they can be prepared to be good husbands and good wives later in life. And I believe that if people read the Affair Repair book and they go through the discussion guide, whether as a couple, as a small group, as an individual, it will cause them to look at themselves and ask the deep questions that sometimes we don't ask, and at least help us to mitigate against some situations that might come up later in life.
Well said. Thank you so much. The Affair Repair book by David and Lisa King. Thank you so much for sharing your story on Excellent Living.
Thank you, Cheryl, for having us.
Words of wisdom and hope for couples fighting for their marriages. What passion and encouragement coming today from a couple who goes by David and Lisa King to protect their real identity. If you'd like to learn more about them and their book, Affair Repair, just visit our website, excellentliving.org. That's excellentliving.org. It's a great resource for married couples and singles. You can order a CD of both programs with David and Lisa, also called Affair Repair, when you click on Resources on the Excellent Living website. If you're struggling in your marriage and you want someone to pray for you, you can call our prayer line, 832-766-1695. That's 832-766-1695. We hope this program has been an encouragement to you as you seek to do life God's way. We also have some online tools like Cheryl's blog. You can read it when you visit our website, excellentliving.org. We'd love to hear from you. Please send us an email and let us know if this program is making a difference in your life. Send it to info@excellentliving.org. That's info@excellentliving.org. If you're able to give a donation of any amount, it would be greatly appreciated. The address, Post Office Box 15285, Chevy Chase, Maryland 20825. That's P.O. Box 15285, Chevy Chase, Maryland 20825. If you prefer, you can donate online at excellentliving.org. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Doris McMillan, inviting you to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. And remember, Excellent Living is doing all of life God's way.